Hello again, honeys, and welcome back. We apologize for our delay in getting this week's Beesness to you. Had a whole lot going on and just plain not enough time. But here we go again, back in gear for you all with our brand new rundown of your headlines. As always, these are hand curated by yours truly with the source doc available in the episode description. Our first headline, activists silently protested the keffiyeh ban at the Noguchi Museum Gala last week. At this point, there have been too many protests related to this keffiyeh ban to list them all out for you here and now. You're going to have to listen to previous Beesnesses. But on Tuesday, October 29th, 12 self-named autonomous actors staged the silent action protesting the museum's keffiyeh ban for staff, which was implemented in August outside the Noguchi Museum during its annual benefit gala. Said protesters in our source articles, quote, "The action was taken in solidarity with the recently terminated staff members, but it was carried out entirely independently with absolutely no knowledge, involvement, or consent from current or former museum staff," end quote. For the protest, the group dressed in all black except keffiyehs draped over their shoulders, projected messages referencing the ban against the museum's brick exterior briefly, wore pantomime masks with the name Noguchi taped over the mouth slit, and created and passed out their own, quote, exemplary censorship award poster prints for the museum leadership. For example, one was given to director Amy Howe for, quote, setting the gold standard for institutional control, end quote. The benefit is significant for the museum, not only as an operations and exhibitions fundraiser, but it's also when they present the Isamu Noguchi Award for, quote, highly accomplished individuals who share Noguchi's spirit of innovation, end quote. This year's two winners were South Korean artist and academic Lee Ufan, who accepted, and Bengali British-American author Jhumpa Lemphiri. As we previously covered, Lahiri declined the prize ahead of the ceremony in response to the ban. We also received word that photographers are selling prints to aid humanitarian efforts in Lebanon. This is partially because Lebanon's ancient heritage is under serious threat as Israel ramps up their attacks on the nation. To be more specific, there's great concern about the site of Baalbek, home to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, once called Heliopolis in Greek, within Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. The site contains ancient Roman temples and archaeological ruins like the famed 1st century CE Roman Temple of Jupiter and the 2nd century CE Temple of Bacchus. The Israeli army has issued new evacuation orders for residents of the area as of last week. For an explanation of what's at stake here in this assault on Baalbek, we turn to Laura Nasrallah, a Lebanese-American scholar of religion and Mediterranean antiquity at Yale University. Nasrallah says, quote, to endanger the archaeology of Baalbek is to threaten not only a treasure of the Lebanese nation, but also our understanding of the long, complex history of ethnicities and religious identities in the region, end quote. Lebanese archaeologist Nelly P. Abod, founder of the Byblos-based organization Museolab, also spoke out against Israeli efforts and especially the reasoning behind these attacks, the supposed presence of Hezbollah. Abod points out there have been many Lebanese lives lost to standing up against Hezbollah and says that nothing justifies the extent of damage that Israeli strikes are causing when the people just want to live in peace. As for our support action in question here, this photography sale, the effort is being called Photographers for Lebanon. In total, they aim to sell 100 limited edition prints by 35 Lebanese and French artists between October 25th and November 25th. Proceeds from the sales will help displaced people in the region via the Lebanese nonprofit Man Liban Dezur. As of November 7th, confirmed one of the campaign's organizers, the effort has raised more than 19,000 euros of its 70,000 euro goal, or about 20,500 US of its 76,000 goal. Now, the why we care about this headline, clear and present danger, yet to date there's no cohesive state plan for preserving or protecting the region put into place. Really, all we've seen is Lebanon's foreign ministry announcing close talks with UNESCO to convene the World Heritage Committee and issue a defense statement of Lebanon's heritage sites. Hyperallergic points out that there is also rising concern that this cultural heritage, art and artifact destruction being done by Israel across the region is an objective rather than an unintended consequence of military action. If so, it constitutes huge huge war crimes. We also heard that a cat sculpture could fetch $7 million. Yes, I said cat. Made by British-born Leonore Carrington, the surrealist who settled in Mexico City in 1942 and lived there for the rest of her life, the work in question is titled La Grande Dame, or The Catwoman, from 1951. It stands at about 80 inches or 203 centimeters tall. It's made of carved and painted wood, and it is considered Carrington's magnum opus, her grandest piece, because, as Hyperallergic puts it, quote, it embodies the artist's worldly, historical, and offbeat interests through a variety of vibrantly painted vignettes referencing cross-cultural folkloric traditions and iconographies, rooted in the feminine and the divine, end quote. It will go up in the Modern Evening Sale at Sotheby's, New York, November 18th, and will be on public view from November 8th until that evening. Why we care about this one? It is the first time this piece will be on the market in nearly 30 years, and it's expected to fetch this big price tag for its small size. We're also fascinated because this is kind of a lowball estimate. Carrington's major painting, Les Distractions de Dagobert of 1945, smashed her previous top sale price of $3.3 million and other records in May when it sold for $28.5 million at Sotheby's. And finally, because there's a historically significant collaboration behind the piece. Carrington worked closely with woodworker Jose Horna, who was the husband of her close friend and colleague, Katie Horna, to make it. For more details on the relationship between Carrington and Horna, see our spooky special. And possibly our biggest headline of the week, Italian police forces uncovered 212 million US of fake art in a forgery ring bust. On November 11th, the Carabinieri Art Squad and other legal forces found this pan-European forgery ring responsible for producing and selling counterfeit works. The investigation, codenamed Operation Caryatide, began in March of 2023 when Italy's Command for the Protection of Cultural Heritage found and confiscated about 200 fake pieces. One was a falsely attributed Modigliani carved caryatid recovered from a businessman in Pisa that served as the inspiration for the name. The initial seizure led to the constant monitoring of various Italian auction house websites to look out for and track similarly suspicious or possibly fake works, or even lot entries that could lead to the counterfeit suppliers. Sure enough, Italian authorities hit the jackpot recently with a string of suspicious online auctions, which led them to the forgery network and 6 of its workshops. 2 were located in Tuscany, 1 in Venice, and 3 abroad. It led them to the front doors of other scheme participants across Spain, Belgium, France, before leading them to compliant auction houses. They seized, at the end, more than 2,100 fake artworks before they could hit the market. An interesting note to this story, the Carabinieri and Public Prosecutor's Office in Pisa attest that Warhol and Banksy, the 2 big names in pop and street art movements, had the most counterfeited pieces. They also believe that some of the forged works may have ended up in well-established institutions. The Pisa prosecutor's office told us that 38 individuals behind these houses and entities are currently under investigation for forgery, handling stolen goods, and illegal art sales. They have yet to be formally charged or sentenced as the investigation continues. Not only is this a shocking and fascinating story just in and of itself, the scale of the bust, the real artist names behind the forgeries, the millions at stake. Yet even cooler is that these fakes are going on display at the Palazzo Toscanelli in Pisa through November 15th of 2024 in order to give the public a glimpse into the scale of this operation, as well as the hidden-ish world of forged art. As much, especially financial damage, as was done here, we still see a unique public learning opportunity come out of the whole thing, which I'm pretty amazed by, and I give it up to the Italian police for turning this scandal into something maybe publicly beneficial. Also last week, 3 were charged with hate crimes for vandalizing the homes of Brooklyn Museum leaders. The vandalization occurred June 12th to the residences of director Ann Pasternak, Board Chair Barbara Vogelstein, Board Treasurer Neil Simpkins, and President and COO Kimberly Panasek Trueblood. Their homes were covered with anti-Zionist messages and splashed with red paint after a heavily policed protest occurred at the museum. Previously, a spokesperson for the Brooklyn claimed that they did not call the police at the time. The Brooklyn Museum has faced protests across this year for what is seen as its, quote, shameless complicity in genocide, end quote. More specifically, the museum donors' connections to investments in the Israeli military. According to a November 4th statement by Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, the accused individuals targeted museum officials who had Jewish-sounding names, and that is why they've been charged with, quote, making a terroristic threat as a hate crime, end quote. Investigators were able to identify the trio essentially based on them being bad at crime. They were caught on surveillance footage near the affected residences in the morning of the graffiti's appearance, and fingerprints were found on a stencil covered in red paint, identified as belonging to one of the charged suspects. A particularly shocking headline from this last week: the UN has removed pro-Palestine art from a public quilt exhibition. The art in question was part of a public exhibition titled The Global Peace Flag, Uniting the World, organized by environmentalist fashion designer Runa Ray, and occurring in the UN General Assembly lobby in New York City. It was taken down November 5th after Israel's permanent representative to the UN, one Danny Danon, condemned references to Palestine contained in some of the works. Endorsed by the UN's Sustainable Development Goals Action Campaign, the exhibition features collaborative quilts made from repurposed fabric scraps decorated with messages by individuals from 195 countries, many of whom were young people and children. Onto the quilts, they painted expressions of, quote, hope for a peaceful future, end quote. The remaining portions will be on view through November 15th. I'm sure you can guess why we care about this one, the specificity of the censorship and this continued use of it around Palestine. Honeys, we've now hit the point where we're having UN-level debates about artistic censorship, about the role of arts and politics and when you can combine the two, when you can reference one with the other. How must these young people feel to see that their work is considered inappropriate, dangerous, inflammatory, not able to be seen? It's unfortunate that a project meant to bring people together is being met with such a split reaction yet again. We also heard last week that Yemen has signed an international treaty denouncing the illicit trafficking of cultural artifacts. On October 7th, they agreed to the international treaty on stolen or illegally exported cultural objects aimed at fortifying one of the current main weaknesses of the 1970 UNESCO Convention against illicit trafficking of cultural artifacts, aka the Honeydrop Convention. The new treaty will come into effect in April of next year for Yemen, and the nation will officially and fully at that point adopt mechanisms to facilitate the protection, claim, repatriation, and return of stolen, other illegally exported cultural objects, as well as to comply with other caveats of this treaty. Of course, the immediate question is, why do we care about one more country signing on to this? And the answer is we care because it's Yemen, because this follows their ratification of the UNESCO Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage back in June. That agreement went into effect in early September of this year, so clearly Yemen is taking these trafficking and looting issues very seriously. Experts partially attribute this to the results of their ongoing civil war. It's created a highly unstable political environment, poor economic conditions, and a humanitarian crisis, making much of the nation vulnerable to corruption, high fuel prices, food insecurity. So we see here evidence of really commendable long-term thinking. In the words of Yemen's ambassador to UNESCO, who is also the signee on behalf of the Yemeni Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one Mohammed Jimma, quote, Yemen will gain the necessary legal support to recover cultural artifacts in case of illegal removal from the country, end quote. Yemen is also doing a really great, effective job at getting more international bodies involved in and responding to this art and artifact looting issue. An example from last September, Yemen created an agreement with the Victoria and Albert Museum for them to hold 4 ancient funerary stones dated back to 1000 BCE for safety reasons. Yemen also has 14 sculptures repatriated from a private collection in New Zealand on long-term loan to the Met in New York City, also for safekeeping. And next, sadly, we have the passing of 3 separate artists to talk about today. If you are not necessarily interested in hearing about death, feel free to skip the next few minutes. First, the passing of painter Frank Auerbach at 93. The Berlin-born artist narrowly escaped concentration camps because of his Jewish parents' decision to school him in the UK. From there, he became one of the major figures of post-war art. He was notably dedicated to figuration at the height of pop abstraction. All of our source articles for this story emphasized the textural and layered nature of his artworks. He passed away on Monday with no cause of death given. Our next story, the 33-year-old Brooklyn-based Tajik author and artist Sabina Koremdel was found dead in her luxury wellness Hamptons hotel room. Her body was discovered in her hotel room on Monday, October 28th, and per a report from the Suffolk County Police Department, she was a victim of violence. More specifically, violence perpetrated by primary suspect Thomas Gannon, who owned a tile company and was reportedly financing Koremdel's art career. There are some rumors swirling about their relationship, but I will not say shit until we know for sure out of respect for the dead. Gannon reportedly confessed to her murder before ending his own life in his Pennsylvania home. Koremdel's legacy will be carried on in part by the Royo Journal, which she established in 2023 with her friend Nazira Karimi, and is a platform for art theory and critical discourse revolving around film and visual arts in Central Asia. Her legacy will also be carried on by her sound art pieces, namely a 7-channel video artwork titled Hafta from 2024, which was a commission for the 60th Venice Biennale. And our third obituary for today, one for Sarah Cunningham, a rising British painter of hypnotic canvases who passed at 31. Born in the early 90s in England, Cunningham rose to prominence for paintings that, in her own words, quote, create this sense of place only to tear it down and build it back up again, end quote. She was also celebrated for her frequent use of unorthodox techniques to create works and materials and noted for having a confidence atypical of young artists. On Monday, Cunningham's body was found on the London Underground tracks by Camden Police, after she'd gone missing in London this past weekend after a night out with friends. Police did not identify her in initial finding reports because the body had not yet been formally identified by Cunningham's family. Said Camden Police, quote, the death is being treated as unexpected, but at this time it is not thought to be suspicious, end quote. If you were looking to skip the sad parts, honeys, feel free to come back in here and now with the announcement from last week that a new Chopin waltz has been discovered. Our story begins in 2019 with the then newly acquired Arthur Satz collection by the Morgan Library and Museum. While doing his curator job, Robinson McClellan, who is also a music composer, discovered the musical manuscript measuring 4 by 5 inches or about 10 by 13 centimeters. The piece then went in for examination and testing with the help of University of Pennsylvania's Chopin specialist, Jeffrey Kalberg, to determine the legitimacy of the ink and paper, that it was consistent with the pianist's other works. Now, some doubt was cast by the fact that this manuscript is unsigned. However, the Morgan Museum Library says that Chopin typically only signed his manuscripts if he intended to gift them, so maybe this one was personal. Not only is it exciting to discover new old music, but this work in question is so unusual. A separate spokesperson for the Morgan has told Hyperallergic that the newly recognized piece is an original from his early career, probably between 1830 and 1835. It is also uncharacteristic of the Polish Romantic composer's oeuvre. Says Hyperallergic, the piece begins with a loud outburst leading to a melancholic melody. McClellan and the Morgan at large tell us that this newly discovered piece expands our understanding of the composer himself. It opens new questions for scholars to consider why he wrote it, who he wrote it for, why he may have done this piece so differently than all his others. And finally, honeys, I wanted to take a moment to recognize, along with the art world, that ArtX Lagos is making a really great case for art fairs having diverse offerings beyond just visual art. Yes, I did steal that headline almost word for word, but it's an important, brief conversation, so here we go. ArtX Lagos is now turning 9 and has grown to become the largest art fair in West Africa with the largest attendance yet this year. Its 2024 dates were October 31st to November 3rd. But what's really gaining attention in the arts world and the world at large is the diversity that it included in its special programs. The founder of the fair, Tokini Peterside Schweibig, told Art News that these social arts initiatives and public program elements were introduced 5 years into the fair's history as a way to look, quote, even more deeply into what was happening in society and think more broadly about how we contribute, end quote. So what do these programs look like? We have sections of the fair including Art X Cinema, the Schools' program, which is part of an initiative designed to bridge the accessibility gap between Lagos's international art world and the most underserved local communities. We also have the Development Forum, a semi-mentorship program which introduces emerging African artists to more established colleagues. This is aimed at mitigating barriers around mentorship, art market learning, and economic support. All in all, the fair provides a blueprint to creating an event that is not only short-term economically helpful, but that really sets up the foundations for longer-term success for African artists or a West African arts market. I really hope the art world takes notice of the successes that this fair has and incorporates some of these ideas, especially regarding access at large. All right, honeys, that is the buzz for you this week. Hope you've enjoyed. Hope you have picked up on a few stories to keep your eye on yourself. We love to inspire the pursuit of knowledge as much as we love to give knowledge here. In the meantime, I will be working, as always, behind the scenes to provide you with new and exciting content. Keep an eye out for our next episode drop. Until then, honeys, as always, take care of yourself, hydrate or dihydrate. Talk soon. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugnout. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.